Welcome to the Jones Zone, a podcast by Daryl and JJ Jones.
Hope you enjoy this episode. Make sure to subscribe and follow us for similar content. We have videos explaining escrow, title insurance, how to get top dollar for your house, mistakes sellers make all the time, how to evict a bad tenant, and so much more.
What's the most common thing you find during your inspections for houses as far as electrical issues?
The problem today is you've got a lot of people hiring handymen to do their electrical work, and then these guys, they know enough to get something to work, but usually don't know how it's done safely. That becomes a problem.
I've never heard of it myself, a whole electrical system failing, but is that even a thing?
Well, a lot of people...
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Jones Zone. Today, we are blessed with the presence of Steve Ortiz from Ecotech. He's an electrician and has been for, oh my goodness, Steve, how long have you been an electrician?
About 40 years now.
Yes, yeah. We both went to high school together, so known each other. Even though you were a football player, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes,
good football player, from my recollection. 40 years in the business, and then I reached out to Steve because he saved me. I don't know if you'll remember this, but a few years back, if not 10 years back, I had a property in escrow, and it was getting an FHA loan, and they had an electrical line over the pool. And it was as though I needed an act of Congress to move that thing. I wasn't sure what we were going to do. The lender was saying, hey, you can't have that. We won't fund the loan. And I called you up. You went out there. And, oh, my goodness. You were like, save the day. Because I can't remember all the details, but I do remember being a little stressed out over it because it seemed like it was going to be something people were – my first one or two people I had spoken to about it, it was going to be very challenging to do. And – you did it. Yeah, I don't know if you remember that. I don't expect you to.
No, that was in Fullerton. No, yeah. I remember it well. No,
okay.
We just know who the proper people are to talk with, and at that time it was Edison we needed to reach out to first. So, once we got them involved and we got the city involved, it helps if you know people down at the city who know you and know of you. So that was really helpful in getting that moving forward. So yeah, most of the time, they just go out there and just give it their blessing, and then you can move on.
What's the most common thing you find during your inspections for houses as far as electrical issues?
Well, usually the standouts are just your homeowner DIY stuff. Usually that stands out even to somebody that's not a trained professional. You can usually just spot something electrical that looks a little bit hokey or, not quite right. The problem today is you've got a lot of people hiring handymen to do their electrical work. And then these guys, they know enough to get something to work, but usually don't know how it's done safely. So that becomes a problem. The homeowner thinks that, hey, it's been working for 10 years. My handyman took care of it, and we're good. But the problem is, it's usually a little bit deeper. That it works, but it's not safe. So there's a fine line between it working and it being safe. And
I could add on to that. Decades ago, my mom had a client with an aluminum ladder in the garage and went up against the live wire and literally died.
Oh my goodness!
So this is literally, you're not exaggerating. This is literally some life and death situations.
100%. Yeah.
Wow. So you have to fix a lot of do it yourself. Stuff that people aren't doing it properly. So I'm sure that every decade presents different challenges as far as electricity because it's evolved like anything else. What do you see, for example, let's say the 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s, are there any unique issues for electrical in houses on different decades that we're not seeing now? Or tell us a little bit about that.
Prior to 1950, they were using a wiring technique called knob and tube. Okay, knob and tube is kind of very antiquated. As long as it's left alone, it's usually just fine. It is, if the wire size is proper with the breaker and such. The problem is nobody leaves anything alone. I mean, when you're doing a remodel or when you're doing any kind of work, something as simple as insulating the attic, say, you're crawling up there, you're bumping into wires, things are getting pushed and shoved, and this old knob and tube wiring in an old house, they might have 3 or 4 circuits max. So people going up in the attic, people doing plumbing or whatever it is, it's they're going to come into contact with it. If seriously, my recommendation, if you have something like knob and tube, that's something you just want to get rid of as quickly as possible, because it's just you're 70, 80 years outdated from what it should be.
I just sold a 100-year-old house. Well, technically it was 95 years old. They had already updated the electrical, but when did they switch away from knob and tube? Was that maybe in the 50s?
Yeah, sometime in the 50s they started going with the Romex, cloth covered Romex. Usually that was the kind of the beginning of Romex, but it was usually okay to continue to reuse. We come across it quite often when we're doing, say, a panel upgrade. We're still we still run it up, and as long as it's not damaged, it's fine. It's when you come across stuff that's been cut, or had a plumber run a drill through it or something like that. That's usually when it becomes a problem. But most of the time, electricity and electrical wiring, as long as it's left intact, it's not something that typically goes bad. Yeah. I mean, it's copper wire. Copper, pretty much, mostly copper wire. Copper will last forever. In the 70s, there was a copper shortage, so they started using, primarily in residential homes, they started using a lot of aluminum wiring, and that was kind of a first of its kind kind of thing. And they realized after a while that maybe that wasn't such a great idea, because now the contractors that installed it were having to go back and fix a lot of problems that were related to the wiring. Now, it's not necessarily the wiring itself that's the problem. Again, as long as it's intact, it's fine. It's the terminations. So where it terminates into an outlet or to a switch, the aluminum tends to oxidate, and also with the type of material aluminum is, it'll expand and contract, loosening up at the joints or where the connections are. So that's really the problem with aluminum wiring. It's not necessarily the aluminum wiring itself. It'll still conduct electricity just fine, but it's at the connection points that become a problem.
Well, 2 things. It's ironic that you should bring that up, because my wife just got through telling me. I told her I was doing a show with you, Electrician, and she had said she had just spoken to an insurance agent, because homeowners insurance has been quite the challenge the last few years. Yeah. And she had talked about, she said, the insurance, and if I remember, or if I'm getting the story straight, the insurance agent said, we're not, I don't know if she said we're not insuring houses that are have aluminum wiring, or absolutely for sure, she said it's something that's challenging. And then second, which was interesting because you just brought it up. And the other thing too, what's the remedy? I've heard people do something they called piggyback or something. Well, am I saying that right?
Well, it's called pigtailing.
Pigtailing.
Okay. Back in the day, you used to be able to get a regular wire nut, okay, standard wire nut, and people used to dab some antioxidant in it, and then they would pigtail in copper to the outlet or to the switch, okay. So they'd add a little piece of copper that would terminate on the switch or the outlet, whichever you're changing. And that used to be kind of a somewhat acceptable way of going about it, but that was never a UL listed approved method. So early on, they had this method of terminating that you had to get this special equipment out, and it was quite expensive to rent. The materials were super expensive to rent as well, and that was the only UL listed approved method at the time. But since then, they've come out with other, for instance, what they call a purple wire nut, which has the antioxidant in it. But that's an approved method. It's UL listed. So it's
what is UL? Explain to what
UL is
what's that
United
mean?
Laboratory. So it's gone through, it's a testing lab. So they go through and they test to see how this is going to work under different conditions. But it's thorough testing that basically is giving a blessing to saying, hey, that will work for that application, such as pigtailing. That's really one of the only UL listed approved methods. That and they've got another terminal that is also approved. The problem is those terminations, both the purple wire nut and what they call the Alumicon connection, which is a screwdriver type connection. It's a great connection, but they're very expensive. So you're talking about $50 to $60 at each outlet in materials alone. So, that can add up when you start counting all your outlets and all your switches. It can be expensive. But what I will tell you is it's a lot cheaper than trying to replace the aluminum.
That's where I was going. That's what I was going to ask you. I mean, so one doesn't necessarily need to, I know this is probably a broad question and each case is individual, but generally speaking, one wouldn't have to replace all the aluminum wiring. They would just do this process.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And I've got an older home. Mine is, luckily, I've got a copper wiring, but there's methods in doing things that don't make you have to tear open the drywall and re-drill, and there's a lot easier ways of doing it.
Are there any situations where that is necessary? I've never heard of it myself, a whole electrical system failing, but is that even a thing that?
Well, a lot of people, so if you go into your 1950, 1960 homes, you'll notice that they just have the two-prong. It doesn't actually have a ground, okay? And there's also safe ways of going about reusing that as well, and that's kind of what I was getting into in my own home. You're ultimately just trying to protect the end user, okay? Having a ground in it, that's a great way of doing it, but it doesn't necessarily protect the end user. And when we talk about end user, we're talking about people that are plugging things in. So we want to make sure that they're going to be safe plugging things in. What we have found is the best way to protect people if they don't have a grounded system is to use GFCI protection. So you can either put a GFCI, ground fault interrupting circuit interrupter. So that's what that is. You can either put it in the panel itself as a breaker, or you can put it at the first point of where that line comes in. So, for instance, I've got a line at my house that goes from the bedrooms all the way through the house, through the living room, but it's a very lightly used circuit. So, it doesn't really affect much. You're going to plug in a lamp maybe, or you're going to plug in a digital clock, something that doesn't draw much. So in most cases, it's just fine just continuing to use that wiring.
And is there anything it's required? Because I know that you're talking about the grounding part. I remember back and possibly before this was being done, or even while that, they had to have and forgive my ignorance, you got to talk to me like I'm a 4-year-old, but they had to find a piece of metal to ground it to, or just the opposite, a grounding. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah. So a ground is just that. It's where the transformer that's hanging on a pole or in the ground at newer homes, but it's where that connects to the actual electrical system, and that is through the ground. So when people are talking about grounding, you're actually driving a rod in current cases 8 feet in the ground, and it's coming into contact with the ground itself, and that's where that's where you get your grounding. In the old days, it used to be you could use the water pipe, the front water pipe as a grounding electrode. Now we primarily will use what's called a UFR ground, which is in a newer home, I'd say 70s and after. But that's tied to the structural metal or the structural reinforcement in your footings. So there's lots of ways to get it. And today with PEX plumbing, what happens is when they change out the plumbing to plastic, now what used to be acceptable, okay, because it was part of your whole water system. If they went to the front of the house for the grounding, now that they're changing houses out, then now that's no longer a viable option.
Interesting. So if someone moves from copper to Plex,
correct,
they need to also check out the electrical.
Absolutely. Yeah, because they may be losing their ground altogether and they're not aware of it. And a lot of these people, and that's why it's important to pull permits, because you're going to have a third party verifying that everything's done properly. I mean, there's a lot of, I come across a lot of clients that say, hey, I don't want to pull a permit. And, I kind of have to balance that. I used to kind of be the enforcer and say, hey, no, you're going to pull a permit. But, also I was losing half my clients. So, I'm just, my primary concern is making sure that the client gets something that's done safely. So,
No, that makes obviously a lot of sense.
I also don't want to cut off half my clients. So, there's a balance.
Right. Now on copper wiring, I mean, and I was thinking this before, so sorry if I'm going back to it. Are there also different degrees or levels of I learned this in my plumbing podcast that I didn't realize that you can, for example, people say, I got copper plumbing. Well, not only do you need copper plumbing, but there's also different thicknesses of copper, which will make it far better than cheaper, thinner copper pipes. Is the same as true with electrical wiring?
Yeah, and it's funny because when you go to school and you learn about electricity, you learn about current flow and how current is based on the conductor and how it can how you can safely carry so much current on a conductor. A very thin conductor could carry a certain amount of electricity safely without heating up. Okay. And as you go up in size, you'll also increase the size of the breakers. So for instance, in a typical residential home, you'll have number 14 wire, which is a smaller gauge than say a number 12 wire. Okay. That number 14 wire is going to be able to safely carry 15 amps. Okay. But a lot of handyman and homeowners may be having a problem with that circuit, maybe tripping or something like that. So they'll just say, hey, let's just logically change this one out to a 20 and it won't trip, right? But that in itself becomes a big problem because now that wire gauge, which was only safe to carry 15 amps, is now carrying 20 plus amps. So you've got to be careful, who you're having do your electrical work.
What would be the proper solution for that occurring? You just get another. Well, go ahead.
Honestly, it's just hiring somebody with the experience and knowledge on how that works. Again, back to how we started. Handyman, they can make something come on and off, but are they doing it safely? Are they ultimately resolving your problem safely by adding a bigger breaker on a wire that's only designed to carry so much current? Beyond that, it starts heating up and causing fires.
Thank you for watching. If you liked the video, please subscribe for more.